So we start with the prayer. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya.
Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya.
Vivekananda Suraye.
Vivekananda Suraye.
Satchit Sukha Swarupaya.
Satchit Sukha Swarupaya.
Swamine Tapaharine.
Swamine Tapaharine.
Swamiji was sitting one day in this room doing some work when he heard the sound of voices from outside. A male voice and a female voice arguing with each other. He was wondering who they were, and he came out to the balcony, looked down and saw that his mother had come to see him. A brahmachari had been stationed at the bottom of the stairs not to allow anybody to go up, and that brahmachari was protesting. And Bhuvaneshwari Devi was trying to come upstairs. The moment she saw Swamiji in the balcony, she called out, "Bile, Bile," and Swamiji came running down like a boy, fell at the feet of his mother, caught hold of her hands, brought her slowly upstairs to his room. They sat together and had a long talk. Swamiji apologized to the mother. "Ma, at the proper time when you needed me, I deserted you and took sannyas and went away." Then Bhuvaneshwari Devi told him, "No, you have done a great job." She told him something Swamiji had not known until then. A couple of years ago, a good number of American disciples had got together and had written a letter to Bhuvaneshwari Devi thanking her profusely for sparing her son to come to United States to spread Vedanta. She says, what more can a mother ask? That the life of her son has been so beneficial to others. Then Swamiji asked her, "Is there anything you want me to do even now? Please let me know." She said, "Bile, my interest is in going on a pilgrimage to East Bengal. Can you help me in that?" Swamiji immediately called a brahmachari, told him, "Make arrangements for our visit to all the pilgrimage centers in East Bengal. Start the correspondence right from now. All the travel arrangements have got to be made." The news spread like wildfire throughout Belur Math. And in a couple of days, a couple of sannyasis and some brahmacharis volunteered to come with Swamiji. There were relatives of Swamiji who agreed to come with them. It was a group of about 8 or 10 people, and one fine morning all of them came to Howrah station, caught a train and started on their pilgrimage of East Bengal. They were today to is Bangladesh. They went to Mymensingh, Narayanganj, and a couple of other very famous places, and finally reached Dhaka. Dhaka was not the capital at that time. The entire area was called Assam. The capital was in Guwahati. Only afterwards, after the partition, that part which came to India in the northeast was divided into the 7 states, the so-called 7 sisters of the northeast. At that time it was one unit, that is Assam. In Dhaka, Swamiji gave a public lecture. The only public lecture he gave in India after his return from the second visit to the West. There were quite a few young people there in that audience. 3 or 4 of them were got so inspired, they met Swamiji later and said, "How do we join the Ramakrishna order?" Swamiji told them, "Go to Kolkata, meet Swami Brahmananda, tell him that I have sent you people, he will do the needful." Ultimately, all the 4 of them became sannyasis of the Ramakrishna order. That was the kind of inspiring talks Swamiji used to give. And from there, they came to the western portion, to the current Assam, Guwahati, which is the temple in Guwahati, very famous, Kamakhya temple, Kamakshi. It is a cave temple. When you enter the temple, you have to go down the steps, and deep below there is a cave where you find the image of Kamakhya. And like all North Indian temples, you can go there and worship yourself. There are no priests. There is one thing interesting about Kamakhya temple, which are not found in other temples. If you go to Kamakhya temple, you have to register your name in a book, and that book is preserved. We also wrote, my wife and I wrote our names in the register. Then the priest told us, even if your grandchildren were to come here later and give us your name and address, we can locate and tell them when you had come here. They keep a record. There is a huge archive there, very systematically organized. That is where goats were being sacrificed. But of late, because of the protest of a large number of people, the goats are not sacrificed. They are symbolically sacrificed and let loose. So if you go there, be careful. You will be surrounded by goats all the time. And if you keep any edible stuff in your hand, including fruits for the deity, they tend to come and snatch them away. I was surprised to see so many goats running around freely. Then they said, we were not allowed to touch the goats because they have already been sacrificed symbolically to Kamakhya. But even then, on one day, every year, Durgashtami day, they have sacrifice, animal sacrifice. But the rest of the days, they don't do that. And that is the day when most of the Assamese don't go to the temple at all. They say they can't withstand the sight of watching goats being sacrificed. From there, the party returned to Kolkata. By that time, it was already the beginning of the year 1902. In January 1902, Nivedita returned from England. She had earned enough money in England through talks and speeches. She was financially comfortably off. And there was a stroke of good luck for her. Even earlier, when they had gone to Kashmir, she had met Mrs. Patterson, the wife of the Consul General of the United States in Kashmir. She ran into them and made their acquaintance, especially when Mrs. Patterson came to know that she is an Irish lady who has come to India, become a brahmacharini, and wants to start a school for girls. Mrs. Patterson went and told her husband, Patterson, who was the Consul General. When Nivedita explained to them after returning from Kashmir her difficulties in starting the school, why the Viceroy is not giving permission, Mrs. Patterson told her husband met the Viceroy and told him, if you don't give Sister Nivedita permission to start a school, I will raise it at the highest diplomatic level. It may lead to a problem between our two countries. The threat from the Americans was enough for the British Viceroy to buckle down. Immediately permission was given. But by that time, Nivedita had left for England. So the Pattersons were waiting for Nivedita to come back. As soon as she came back, she was given the good news. And straight away she started off her school in a rented building. And very interestingly, a child widow who joined her school at that particular time later became the first president of the Sharada Ashrama, Sharada Mutt. That shows how beautifully she was able to bring up the children of Hindus in their own culture. This is what Swamiji had insisted upon. Teach them Hindu culture, Indian culture. Along with that, teach them also some trade so that they can earn a living for themselves. And that is what she carried out. And that is the syllabus even today in all the Nivedita schools. Apart from the usual physics, chemistry, mathematics and other things, they learn a large number of trades and also about Indian culture. So Nivedita was very happy. Swamiji was back in Kolkata. It was easy for her to come from Kolkata to meet him anytime she wanted, which means the school was flourishing very well. We now come to the middle of June 1902. One day, Swamiji was having dinner in the dining hall in the night when a brahmachari casually asked him, "Swamiji, do you know who you are?" And in a very grave voice, Swamiji replied, "Yes, I know who I am." There was a hushed silence because people knew about the prophecy. Somebody went and told Swami Brahmananda. Brahmananda came running, caught hold of the hands of Swamiji and said, "No, Naren, don't say that. Don't say you know who you are. You don't know who you are." Swamiji replied in a grave voice, "No, Raja, I know who I am." From that day onwards till his day of Mahasamadhi, whenever he used to go for a walk in the Belur Mutt grounds, accompanied by somebody or other, he would point to a particular spot and say, "When I am gone, cremate me there. When I am gone, cremate me there." Nobody took him seriously. He appeared to be in good health. Basically, though he was suffering from diabetes, he was suffering from high blood pressure, and you remember the swollen heart in Amarnath cave and the right eye damaged. In spite of all this, he was very active. And then one day he called a brahmachari, asked him to bring an almanac, Panchanga, told him, "From today onwards you read the stellar and planetary positions every day." The brahmachari went on reading the Panchanga. He read the Panchanga for the 4th of July. When he wanted to read it for the 5th of July, Swamiji stopped him and said, "Enough." Nivedita says all the indications were there staring us in the face. We couldn't understand what he was doing. He was giving us hints. He was giving us hints about his departure. Now, not only that, he even indicated the date on which he is going to leave, 4th of July. She says, how is it we were blind? How is it we never understood what he was trying to tell us? 2nd of July. It was a Wednesday, Ekadashi day. That morning, Nivedita came to Belur Mutt. Around 10 o'clock, she came to Swamiji's room, sat with him for about an hour and a half, discussing all the matters concerning the school. She got all the points clarified. At 11:30, she wanted to leave, saying, "I have to go back to Kolkata." Swamiji told her, "Why don't you stay? This is the prasad time for Thakur. 11:30 is the time at which in all the Ramakrishna mutts there is a worship of Sri Ramakrishna. 12 o'clock food offerings are made. Why don't you stay for that?" She said, "Yes, I will stay and go back." No, have prasad and go back. You can't go back empty-handed. You know, prasad in Ramakrishna Mutt is not the hand prasad which you get in most temples. It is lunch. I was not aware. Once in Madras, I had gone there in the morning, Saturday morning, for the Balaka Sangha, children's group, and after that I went on talking to one of the brahmacharis and another sannyasi, and it was 11:30. They said, "Can you stay for worship?" I said, "Yes." 12 o'clock they said, "Have prasad and go." I thought they will give me something in the hand. I can pack it and take home. No, come to the dining hall. Regular lunch was served to us. That is prasad there. Nivedita knew that because she had already been to Belur Mutt several times. She said, "Agree." Then Swamiji told her, "After the worship, Aratrika, come straight to my room. Then you can have prasad." She couldn't understand why Swamiji was saying all that. 12 o'clock she came to Swamiji's room. Swamiji called a brahmachari, told him to bring one plate, one katori, one tumbler, one mat. The brahmachari brought all those things. The mat was spread on the floor. The plate, the katori and the tumbler were placed before the mat. And then he told the brahmachari, bring all the food articles. Within 15 minutes, all of them were brought. Then he told Nivedita, Margot, sit down. Swamiji, what about you? She said. Oh, today is Ekadashi. I am going to fast in the morning. I will have my food in the night. So she sat. Swamiji started serving her. She was embarrassed. Swamiji, what is it you are doing? Why are you serving me? I can serve myself. He said, what does it matter? No, Swamiji, you are my guru. The disciple is to serve the guru, not the guru the disciple. Swamiji said, what? Once in a way. What does it matter? So she reluctantly agreed. Swamiji served her food. She finished her lunch and was about to get up with the plate and the other things in her hand when Swamiji said, no, leave them be, let them be. Let them be on the floor. You also don't get up, sit down. He went to a corner, brought a pitcher of water, told her, Margot, stretch your hands over the plate. She stretched her hands over the plate. He poured water over her hands and dried her hands with his upper garment. Now Nivedita was red in the face. Swamiji, what is it you are doing? What is it you are doing? Coolly Swamiji replied, did not Jesus wash the feet of his disciples? Nivedita says, it was on the tip of my tongue to say that was the last time in his life. She says, I bit my tongue. When did Jesus wash the feet of his disciples? It's a very, very thrilling story in the life of Jesus Christ, the Last Supper. 2 days before his crucifixion. It was a Passover festival of the Jews. He invited his 12 disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane, where there was a small house. All of them assembled there, and the 13 of them sat together for dinner. That is why for Christians, 13 is an unlucky number. In many hotels, you go from floor to floor, you have 12, 12A, 14. They don't want to give the number 13. 13 people were sitting. I have been reading the Bible for quite a long time, and I used to find a passage in that Last Supper. Jesus broke the bread with his apostles. I was not able to understand what is this breaking of the bread means. When I was in Kashmir for a meeting of the Government of India, we were taken on a tour of some of the places near Srinagar. We were taken to a small village, to a Muslim's house, where lunch had been arranged. Luckily for us, vegetarian lunch, because half the crowd were vegetarians, pulichars. Vegetarian lunch. We went there and we found a huge circular plate. We were asked to sit around these plates, and the head of the family sat in the place very close to his wife, who was preparing parathas in the stove. She would prepare a paratha, give it to her husband would break it into 2 pieces, pass it round. At that time it suddenly struck me, my God, this is what the Bible is saying. Jesus, as the leader of that Passover dinner, broke the bread and gave it to his disciples. You must have seen the painting of Leonardo da Vinci, which became very famous. They are all sitting at a table. There were no tables at that time. They used to sit on the floor. Even today in Kashmir, in all villages, people sit on the floor. They don't use tables. And what happened after the Last Supper was over? The Roman captain with his soldiers walks in. Then one of these 12 apostles stands up, comes and stands by the side of the Roman captain, points a finger at Jesus and says, "He is the one, he is the one, he is the one," 3 times. Then the Roman captain tells him, "You are under arrest. Tomorrow morning, you have to come with us to Jerusalem." And he throws a bag, 30 pieces of silver at that betrayer, who collects it and runs away. Judas Iscariot, the famous Judas of Christianity. He runs away. The former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Israel, Chaim Cohn, C-O-H-N, has written a book, The Trial and Death of Jesus. You know what he has done? He is a Supreme Court judge. He knows Israeli law, and he studied all the books about the laws of the Jews at the time of Jesus. And Jesus must have been tried according to those laws. And there he mentions that this was the way a person had to be arrested. A witness had to identify him thrice. And that night, what does Jesus do? I am telling you all this because this is not very well known to many people. What did Jesus do that night? He told all the disciples to stay back. He went all alone into the Garden of Gethsemane and communed with his Father all night. What transpired, nobody knows. Even today, nobody knows. So it has given rise to a lot of guesswork. What could have happened? One thing was noticed: in the morning, next morning, his face was calm, peaceful, and how readily he agreed to go to Jerusalem to stand trial. So, about 100 years ago, a Greek author, Nikos Kazantzakis, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature for his book Zorba the Greek, which has been made into a movie, very famous movie. He wrote a novel, The Last Temptation of Christ. He says Jesus that day decided that he will escape the cross, that he would run away. He ran away, got married to Mary Magdalene. The two of them shifted to Syria, Damascus, lived there happily, and Jesus died a natural death in the bed at the age of 70. And Nikos ends the story by saying, "And the dream broke." That is the last temptation. Satan tempting Jesus, run away from here, escape the cross. But that was not Jesus' intention. He did not want to listen to the voice of Satan. That is why when he is put on the cross, just before he dies, he is supposed to have said, "It is done. It is done. It is done." What has been done? My martyrdom. I have given up my life for the sake of the divine. And what a powerful impact it has had on human history. That single act. Next question which arises is, did Jesus die on the cross at all? There is another very big question. 3 people in England felt that he did not die, anthropologists. They traveled all over the Europe and collected a lot of data and wrote a book, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, where they said Jesus did get married, did go to Damascus, and did have children. And you know who is the latest descendant of the family of Jesus? He lives in England, Duke of Winchester. This is what he mentions in that book. This gave rise to a sensation. The Roman Catholic Church promptly banned it. And you know, Hollywood is a very interesting thing. Whenever a book is banned, they immediately make a movie of that. Da Vinci Code was banned, they made a movie of that. Because America doesn't care for all these things. So they made a movie. I have a copy of the movie with me. I even have the novel with me, The Last Temptation of Christ. Dan Brown had a brilliant idea. He wrote a fictional novel of how most of these things had been hidden in the painting of Leonardo da Vinci of the Last Supper. In that painting, Jesus is in the center. To his right, there is a female form which is leaning towards him. You know what the people used to call Jesus in those days? Abba. Abba, in the language of Hebrewism, is Father. And when the Abba became a preacher, what was he called? Rabbi. And Judaism demanded that the rabbi should always be married. He cannot be a bachelor. This is law, even today. So the surmise was, the one sitting next to him was Mary Magdalene. She had no place to sit there with him except that she was already married to him. This is the Da Vinci Code. You remember that novel, the Da Vinci Code? This is that code. Leonardo da Vinci had implanted that code in that painting. Da Vinci Code was promptly banned, and Hollywood promptly made a movie. Tom Hanks became very, very famous, the Da Vinci Code. Of course, it goes on and on in a very groovy manner. What was the attitude of Jesus on the cross? Next morning, after the Passover, he is taken to the house of Caiaphas, the leader of the Sanhedrin, 21 tribes of Israel. Caiaphas tells him, "Why do you antagonize the Romans?" Jesus says, "I have already preached. Give unto Rome, Rome's. Give unto the Caesar, Caesar's. Give unto God, God's." I have not antagonized him. Then Caiaphas says, "I wash my hands." It is not Pontius Pilate who washes his hands off. Caiaphas says, "I wash my hands." He is taken straight to Pontius Pilate, the Roman consul. It is that man who awards him the punishment of cross. Punishment by the cross was a Roman punishment, not a Jewish punishment. And see how Paul twisted the whole story? Because of that, for 2000 years, millions and millions of Jews have been exterminated. Holocaust, Second World War. Swami Vivekananda was aware of all these things. That is why he used to say, we should make a deep investigation into the origins of Christianity. What you read in the Bible or the preachings of Paul, you must go to the origin to find out what are the teachings of Christianity or Christ. I am mentioning all these things to you because these are relatively not so well known. As a matter of fact, the Pope, prior to Pope, had even apologized to the Jews for the atrocities committed against them for the 2000 years. If you read the history of the Christianity, you will get an idea of how it has undergone so many changes. The current Pope, he is trying to reform a lot of things. He is so humble a person. You know the statement he made? Jesus was a shepherd with the crook in his hands. So I have to live like a simple, ordinary man. I don't know, I have read this somewhere, whether it is true or not, I don't know. He sleeps on the floor. He doesn't sleep on a cot. Why? This is the way Jesus slept. Swami Vivekananda used to say this. Unless you lead the life of Jesus the Christ, you will never be able to understand his greatness. And now, that statement is about to escape from Nivedita's lips when he bites it, because she knew. July the 3rd passed off without any event. We now come to 4th of July, the last day in the life of Swami Vivekananda. He got up at 4 o'clock as usual, woke up the entire Belur ashram, and by 5 o'clock he was ready to, after bath and wash, to go to the shrine for the morning Aratrika. The Aratrika went on till 6:30. 6:30 to 7 was meditation. At the end of the meditation, 7 o'clock, all of them came downstairs to the dining hall for a light breakfast. 8 o'clock, Swamiji called a brahmachari. He said, I want to go back to the shrine. I'll close the door from inside, I will not latch it. You stay outside and see that I am not disturbed. The brahmachari sat there. Swamiji went in, closed the door from within, and the brahmachari says for 1 hour there was absolute silence. Nothing inside. 9 o'clock, a murmur of voice. He could hear Swamiji's voice murmuring, half an hour long. 9:30, Swamiji started singing all the songs he used to sing in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna. Every one of them. The brahmachari was amazed. What is happening? He thought. 10 o'clock, the door opened. Swamiji came out. The brahmachari says there was so much glow on his face, I had to avert my eyes. I couldn't see his face so clearly. Then he slowly came down. I caught hold of his hand and brought him down. And then, as soon as he came down, Swami Shivananda came. Mahapurush Maharaj, a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, caught hold of Swamiji's hands and took him along with him to Swamiji's room. 10:30, Swamiji made an announcement. I want to talk to all the brahmacharis. All the brahmacharis came to his room. For about an hour or so, he gave them a lecture on Shukla Yajurveda. There is one passage, Sushumnaha Surya Rashmihi. Swamiji says this has been translated by commentators. Surya Rashmi, sun's rays. What is Sushumna? Moon's rays. They are wrong. Sushumna is Sushumna Nadi. And at the end of the Sushumna Nadi, in the Sahasrara, there are the sun's rays. Sun's rays always mean knowledge, realization, when you can do all your activities in the sunlight. So I want you people to investigate this. Since that time, a lot of research has gone into the entire subject. Now it is known that the Vedic rishis were aware of Hatha Yoga. They were aware also of the various chakras, Sushumna Nadi. One day I was in Madras talking to the editor of Vedant Kesari, discussing all this with him, when he suddenly said, hey, why don't you write an article over that? I said, why not? 2 months later, I sent him the article. It is published in the Vedant Kesari on the knowledge of Hatha Yoga among the Vedic rishis. Upanishads, the Vedas, and Hatha Yoga. There I have given the proof to indicate how the Vedic rishis were aware of Hatha Yoga. So that was another aspect of Swamiji which has been resolved. He knew that these people were aware of Hatha Yoga, but it had to undergo a scientific investigation. Now it has been accepted. 12 o'clock, brief lunch in his own room. Then he took rest. 1:30, again he convened a meeting of all the brahmacharis. 1 or 2 of the brahmacharis who later became sannyasis and 1 or 2 of them became presidents of the Ramakrishna order have written their reminiscences where they say that they attended this class as brahmacharis. Panini's grammar. How would you like to study grammar immediately after a hot lunch? Same thing will happen to you, which happens in my class. Eyelids become heavier and heavier, right? Or in the class on Jnana Yoga, immediately after lunch, how about studying Jnana Yoga, Brahma Sutra? So I always tell people who come to Prashanti Kutiram, if you don't get sleep in the night, pick up Brahma Sutra Bhashya of Adi Shankaracharya, start reading it, in no time you will get sleep. It puts you to sleep because everything goes above your head. But these people say it was one of the finest lectures we heard. 4 o'clock, he called Shivananda and said, Shivananda, let us go to Belur village. They went out of the campus to the Belur village and they passed a shop selling wood. And Swamiji saw logs of sandalwood. Mahapurush, mark that shop. He showed him a shop selling wood, that too sandalwood. Shivananda says, why is Swamiji telling me all this? Mark that shop. And later he says, my God, I was so blind. So that night, after Aratrika, Swamiji again got his dinner to the room. By 8 o'clock, he had finished his dinner. He called a brahmachari to spread a mattress on the floor and to place a pillow. He said, I am going to sleep and take rest. Fan me. Mind you, 4th of July. Kolkata can be very hot in July. And Swamiji slept on the left with the elbow on the pillow supporting his head. Left like this. 45 minutes. The brahmachari was sitting in front of him, fanning him all the time. After 45 minutes, Swamiji heaved a sigh, deep sigh, and a small cry came out of his mouth. The brahmachari says, almost like a child seeing a nightmare in the dream and crying out. Keening. Something like that. Then Swamiji turned to the right. This time he supported his right elbow on the pillow and the head on the right. Legs were stretched out. Where have you seen this pose? You people should know. Ananta Padmanabha, Tiruvananthapuram. And where else? Near Bangkok, there is a temple of the reclining Buddha. There you find Buddha like this. And that is the posture in which Buddha entered Mahaparinirvana. The brahmachari couldn't make out. He went on fanning. 15 minutes later, he saw the eyes of Swamiji open wide. Big eyes. He already had big, powerful eyes. They opened wide. He didn't say anything. A little blood trickled out of the corner of the right nostril. The brahmachari was wondering what is happening. Mahasamadhi. Over. The brahmachari waited for 5 minutes. Then he got scared. He came to the balcony and shouted. People started coming one by one. They gathered there. They sat around Swamiji, went on reciting Vedic mantras, Upanishadic mantras, Bhagavad Gita, bhajans. Immediately somebody was sent to Kolkata to inform Dr. Mahendra Sarkar, to inform Swami Brahmananda who was there, and Sister Nivedita. Within 1 hour, all the three of them arrived. Mahendra Sarkar said, get cow's ghee, warm it, rub it on the spine. He may be in deep samadhi, he may come back. They tried doing it till 6 o'clock in the morning. Nivedita sat by the side, took Swamiji's head in her hand, put it on her lap, went on fanning it throughout the night. Nothing helped. By 6 in the morning, the doctor declared, there is no more life in the body. So please make all the arrangements for cremation. Then one by one, it started flashing on them what Swamiji had been telling them in the last 10 days. When I am gone, cremate me there. So this spot had been identified. Mahapurush, mark this shop. So Mahapurush sent somebody to that shop to purchase sandalwood logs for the cremation. It appears as if Swamiji had meticulously planned his departure and given instructions to see that nobody is troubled. Water was brought from the river Ganga and Swamiji got a bathing. A new Gerua cloth was draped over the body. Meanwhile, outside at this spot indicated by Swamiji, a funeral pyre had been built of sandal logs. The body was ceremonially brought there, accompanied by Vedic chanting. One of the brahmacharis was a brahmana by birth, went and took a dip in the river, came with wet clothes to perform the last ceremonies. The appropriate mantras were read. They were all sitting around that pyre when the brahmachari went round anti-clockwise, apradakshina. Normally pradakshina is done clockwise. This time he went round thrice with a wicker in his hand lit, a burning taper. And at the appropriate time, he applied the light or the flame to these logs. Sandalwood catches fire very fast. Immediately it caught fire. Something happened to Brahmananda. He called Nivedita, Margot, please come here. You also light the pyre. She said, why? Why should I do that? You were the only relative he had in the sannyasa ashrama. Sannyasi is supposed to have cut off all the bonds, but you are like his daughter. This was the only relationship he had in the sannyas. You also do that. Unusual. So she also did it. Then they all sat around the pyre. Some more sandalwood had been piled over the body, and the whole thing started burning. A thought occurred to Nivedita. Mind you, a thought in her head. She didn't express it in words. How stupid of me. Before the body was consigned to flames, I could have cut off a piece of the cloth from the upper garment to keep with me as a souvenir. Just then something came floating in the air, brushed her upper right arm, fell on her lap. A piece of the upper garment of Swamiji, triangular piece, one edge, charred black. Her wish was fulfilled. She picked it up reverently, took it home and sent it to Josephine MacLeod. Yum Yum, you are very close to his heart, so you deserve to have it. Josephine used to keep it in her purse. In the year 1910, she was returning to India or coming to Bengaluru. She was passing through the Suez Canal. It was a beautiful evening with a light breeze. She came on the deck and just out of curiosity, she picked out the piece of cloth. She was looking at it when there was a whiff of the wind. It escaped her fingers and floated away into the waters of the Suez Canal. Josephine later says, Swamiji fulfilled the wishes of the Western disciples by leaving behind a relic. He also fulfilled the wishes of the Eastern disciples by not leaving anything behind. You know our custom? When a person dies, nothing belonging to him or her has to be kept at home. Everything has to be distributed, right? But only these days people keep photos. Only in the case of very great people, the ashes are preserved. Shri Ramakrishna, Sharda Devi, Swamiji himself. So by evening, it was all over. The ashes were gathered and brought into the Bengaluru complex. What is the achievement of Swami Vivekananda? This is the place where the body was cremated, where there is a temple. This temple came up in the 1920s thanks to the money given by Betty Leggett, the elder sister of Josephine. She had come to Bengaluru. She heard that there is no proper temple in the name of Vivekananda. Immediately she gave money and said, at this spot where he was cremated, you build a temple. This temple has a ground floor and an upstairs. You go to the top, you see this. An ancient form of Omkara above a pot. What is that pot? Containing the ashes. Flower. And over that, Omkara. And below, you see this. A bas relief made of marble attached to the wall. It is exactly the copy of this which you find everywhere, all over the world. This is the posture of meditation from a photograph taken in England. You remember? We started this lectures with this picture. And you can find the same thing in Dhyana Mandira. In front of the Omkara, you find this painting here. And this is the dream and ambition of Swamiji, a temple for Sri Ramakrishna. This could be constructed only in the 1930s. The design had already been made by Swamiji. All the other people had to do was to follow the design. It is worth a visit. And inside there is a marble bust of Sri Ramakrishna in a sitting posture. In many other places, you have only photographs. But in some of the major temples, you have the bust. And this was the creation of Swami Vivekananda. Left extreme, Swami Vivekananda's temple. Next to that, in the background, the house of the president. This is the place where the president of the Ramakrishna order stays. Next to that is the temple of Swami Brahmananda. Next to that is the temple of Holy Mother Sharada Devi. Next to that, in the background, the temple of Sri Ramakrishna, and next to that, the room of Swami Vivekananda. The room of Swamiji is open only once in a year to public. 12th January, his birthday. The rest of the times you have to look into the room through the window. So this is the story. If you want to learn the teachings of Swamiji, you don't have to read all his works. They've run into 9 volumes. Those small books, 4 of them: Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga. They are enough. And for the Indians, lectures from Colombo to Almora, additional. If you read these 5, you get the entire message of Swami Vivekananda in a nutshell. Okay? I have given you a very brief glimpse into the life. The life is very, very vast, full of incidents. There was hardly a day in his life when there was no well-known incident happening. There was a lot of humor in his life. There was a lot of seriousness and great attraction felt by the audiences. How all of them fell over backwards to accommodate Swami Vivekananda's wishes. And this is the ultimate product. So we close this series of talks by a prayer to the one who made all this possible. Who was that? Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Swamiji himself used to say, if I have done anything good, it is because of Sri Ramakrishna. I am his creation. He created me. I am his creation. It is a fitting conclusion because this prayer was composed by Swami Vivekananda about his Guru. So, please sit properly. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya Sarvadharmaswarupine Avatara Varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha.